Доброго дня, пані Олександра. Ще я хочу перевірити. Чутно, мене видно?
Так, все чутно.
Так, все, дякую.
Доброго дня всім. Леся, як у мене зі звуками відео?
Вас гарно видно, звук прекрасний, пане Юрію.
Дякую. Дякую.
Добрий день.
Доброго дня. Вас поки що не видно. А Олена, все бачу, з'явилася. Так, все гаразд. Шановні колеги, ми просимо поки вимкнути мікрофони, щоб не було сторонніх шумів. І прошу на це зважати під час нашого заходу, тому що у нас багато учасників і учасниць, і щоб ми не перебивали один одного наші виступи цими шумами.
Пані Олександра, вітаю, всім вітання.
Доброго дня, пане Йосифе. Радий вас бачити. Я перепрошую, а чи є у нас пані Матільда Богнер? I'm sorry, do we have Matilda Bogner with us?
Так, є.
Yes, I'm here. Can you see me, hear me?
Yes, I see you, hear you. Thank you, Matilda.
Okay, thank you.
Коллеги, доброго дня. Я делаю трансляцию на нашей странице в социальных сетях, поэтому просьба за 30 секунд до того, как мы, собственно говоря, начнем дискуссию, дать мне сигнал, чтобы я начал трансляцию.
Добре, Сергію.
Засідання, щоб можна було на поправку.
Колеги, ми буквально за хвилину будемо починати наш захід, і я за 30 секунд, Сергію, дам тобі сигнал, щоб ти, як просив, запустив трансляцію. Буквально ще хвилинка, до нас приєднуються учасники і учасниці.
Colleagues, we start in a minute.
Я поки нагадаю, що ми будемо дуже просити усіх учасників і учасниць на час, поки вони не виступають, не забувати вимикати ваші мікрофони, інакше з'являються сторонні шуми, і це перебиває виступи спікерів і спікерок. Я поки попрошу Олега із логістичної компанії перекладацької, будь ласка, розказати, як ми будемо вести трансляцію двома мовами, буквально 3 хвилини на технічно-адміністративне оголошення. Олег, будь ласка.
Шановні учасники, перед
Dear
початком
participants, before this conference, I would like to give you some technical tips. First of all, you have to make sure that the last Zoom program is installed here. You can download it by following the link. You can also use the translation option, either Ukrainian or English. You can actually press it on the globe down on this screen. If you do not have the globe, you can actually download the latest option of this conference. Whenever you have any technical issues, you can address me directly. I am the organizer in the first row of the organizers. Thank you.
Я всіх вітаю, але можна я вас не буду лякати своїми проводками? І поки не буду...
Таню, раді вас бачити.
Да, виключу відео, добре? Дякую.
Так, будь ласка. Сергію, може за 30 секунд, як я і обіцяла, попереджаю тебе, ми за хвилину починаємо.
Добро, тогда буквально через 30 секунд без моей команды можно начинать, здороваться, мы уже выходим в прямой эфир.
Я попрошу виключити у когось включений мікрофон. Максим, будь ласка, може учасник чи учасниця не знають, як це зробити. Ідентифікуйте цю людину і вимкніть її мікрофон примусово.
Так, зараз, хвилинку, виключаю.
Демократичний початок произвело, да, знайти і виключити.
Доброго дня, шановні глядачі нашого онлайн круглого столу на тему реформа Служби безпеки України.
Good day, dear audience. Today we are going to speak on how to foster a dragon, and this was organized by the rights advocacy company. We have invited the representatives of the Business Association, Anti-Corruption Association, the national deputies, the special services representatives to discuss the draft legislation offered by the representatives on the reforming of the social service of this. And the discussion on the legislation and the problems that should be solved by the legislation have been lasting for half a year. And today we are having an experimental format. It consists of 4 panels. 3 of them are occupied by the represented speakers, and we have decided to refuse from the long speeches, and we would kindly ask all of the speakers to stick to the regimen, to the agenda, having 3 minutes for a speech. So at the final part of the meeting, we could discuss what was expressed and to talk on what was beyond our conversation. The event is moderated. I and my colleague, Ivan Fursenko, the first deputy of the chief of all Ukrainian Association of the Communities, and I would give him the word at this panel where we will have the participants, the national deputies of Ukraine, the members of parliament, and now we are opening the first panel. The draft law 3196, the vision of the international organizations, I would eagerly give the word to Matilda Ogner, the chief of the monitoring organization of the UN in Ukraine. Ms. Matilda, the floor is yours.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me today to share our views on the SBU reform. We think it's a very important, necessary discussion, and the reform is obviously very necessary and long overdue. As you know, our mission has been documenting human rights violations committed by the SBU in the context of armed conflict since 2014. We have documented hundreds of cases of conflict-related enforced disappearances, arbitrary detention, including secret and incommunicado detention, torture and ill treatment, in which SBU officers were complicit. We have also seen almost complete impunity, unfortunately, of the perpetrators from the ranks of the SBU, as well as a strong reluctance by the security service to improve its human rights record from the inside. We hope that the reform of the SBU will effectively put an end to further violations and help with ensuring accountability for any violations that have already occurred. We will gladly provide specific comments on the second draft law that is to be published today. But now here today, I just make 3 general comments. Firstly, we welcome the removal of investigative functions from the SBU, and we believe that this needs to happen. We're concerned that the handover of investigations from the SBU to the State Bureau of Investigation will take years and could be stopped or reversed in the future. We therefore urge that the full removal of investigative functions from the SBU as soon as possible. Secondly, we would like to see more legal safeguards on actions by the SBU that can lead to human rights violations. In particular, there is a need for legal safeguards to be placed for such things as searches, detention, access to personal information, as well as for any intervention that impacts on freedom of the media. As we have documented human rights violations by the SBU in these areas in the past, we need to make sure that this will not happen in the future. Third and final point is about control and oversight. Whatever form the SBU reform ultimately takes, the service will always have significant powers and accordingly significant opportunities to violate human rights. The legislation therefore needs to establish or designate a body that is independent from the executive and independent from the security services themselves, that has a strong mandate in line with best practices and guidance from the UN and from the Council of Europe to oversee all aspects of their work and operations of the security services in Ukraine. Thank you again for inviting me today, and I look forward to hearing the rest of the discussion.
Дуже дякую, пані Матільда, і я хочу передати слово Фредеріку Веселю.
I would like to give the floor to Frederick Wessel, who is specialized in the conflicts in Ukraine. Frederick, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be on this panel today. So the EU advisory mission really considers the SSU draft law that passed the first reading in the Rada in January as a very significant development. I mean, as I think we all know, the reform of the SSU is one of the most difficult reforms in Ukraine, but it's also one of the most important ones. But I think what we've seen from the beginning of the year is considerable political will to transform the SSU into a modern, effective, and accountable service, focusing on its core task, which should be counterintelligence, counterterrorism, and protection of state secrets. EUAM, we're part of the International Advisory Group, together with the EU delegation, with the US Embassy, and the NATO liaison office here. And I just want to underline that our overarching objective is really to support the reform to make the SSU a modern European service that's more capable of defending Ukraine against threats to its security. The draft law, as approved in the first reading, is not perfect, but I think it really does bring us much closer to meaningful reform of the SSU. And ahead of the second reading now, I think the focus should really be on protecting some of the key provisions and also addressing some of the outstanding issues. And let me just mention some of the key provisions that need to be protected. First of all, and this is something which Matilda also mentioned, the draft law proposes the complete phasing out by 2024 of all pre-trial investigative authority and the transfer of these responsibilities to other law enforcement agencies, such as the new Bureau of Economic Security. And I mean, this includes transferring competencies over economic crime, organized crime, smuggling, and anti-corruption. It also means abolishing Department K. And this is a really key to this whole reform exercise, because this is about transforming the SSU from a law enforcement agency into a pure counterintelligence agency. Secondly, there's a downsizing of the SSU from current 31,000 to the 17,000 foreseen in the draft law by 2024. This is also an extremely important part of this reform, because this is about making the SSU more in line with partner services in Europe, in particular when it comes to the size in per capita terms. Thirdly, what's also very important to protect is the partial demilitarization of the service. This is something which should be really maintained as we go towards the second reading. But as I mentioned, there's still a few outstanding issues that we believe need to be improved. First of all, powers regarding automatic access to databases, blocking of websites, revocation of broadcasting licenses, and interference into electoral processes exceed powers granted to most Euro-Atlantic counterintelligence agencies. Such excessive powers are problematic because they risk infringing human rights and fundamental freedoms. Secondly, there's a need to clarify some key definitions, some key terminology in the draft law, such as state security, national security, and organized crime characterized by transnationality. Thirdly, there are provisions on judicial and financial control that should be defined more robustly to ensure the judicial branch's control over application of intrusive measures. The law should also stipulate the scope and extent of judicial oversight. This is very, very important. Fourthly, the proposed deployment of SSU staff to public and private institutions requires further definition of scope and limitations. Such mechanisms risk infringing on the independence of institutions of government and risk being used for political ends. But let me just reiterate, as I said in the beginning, overall, we think the draft law from the first reading is a step in the right direction. And we really do hope that in the second reading, some of these key elements will be maintained. And let me just conclude by saying that what we also consider extremely important is the introduction of parliamentary oversight. The law on intelligence was passed last year. It foresees the establishment of a distinct, separate parliamentary committee that would exercise oversight. And we very much look forward to this being established in the immediate future. Thank you very much.
Дуже дякую, пане Фредерік. І я хочу передати слово.
Thank you, Frederick. I would like to give the floor to Tomasz Strycharz, the representative of security policy.
Вдячний за запрошення на це зустріч нашого.
Thank you for our online invitation. I would like to speak Ukrainian, but I will speak in English.
At the very beginning was that 3 minutes for each speaker is much less than should be, because it's very huge topic to discuss about it. But since we International Advisory Group consists of NATO representatives of NATO, European Union Advisory Mission, and US Embassy, so very comments has been already said by Frederick, and of course some comments and some analysis provided by Mrs. Matilda. So we are fully aligned with this opinion. So let me only add some key important messages, which is from my side absolutely important. From our perspective, always, because we are speaking about draft law on the SSEU, so the question remains, or it's so-called, the glass can be half full or half empty. In my opinion, the glass is absolutely half full, but some improvement should be done in order to implement a very good law. And also, I would like to emphasize that even the best law on the SSU adopted sooner or later may not be sufficient in the so-called satellite laws, and regulations are not written properly, carefully, and in accordance with the best practices. I mean that, for example, the panel code or code of the criminal procedure, the law on the protection of classified information is going to be implemented very soon, and the law on the parliamentary oversight, and etc. So those satellite laws from our perspective are absolutely important in order to have also, or to consider the separately law on the SBU. Without good implementation of the satellite laws, so we will not, it seems to me, we will not receive, or we will not achieve good product as far as the SSEU itself reform. So let me also underline that once the law on the SSEU is approved, the long and difficult road of implementation will begin. Yeah, thank you very much.
Дуже дякую вам, пане Томаше. Я вже говорила, що ми розуміємо.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tomasz. We do understand that how difficult it is to fit 3 minutes, but we wanted to give them an opportunity to provide different points of view from different sectors of societies. That is why my co-moderator, Ivan Fursenko, we are grateful to you for trying to stick to the regiment, those not so easy 3 minutes in such difficult conditions. And I would like to give the floor to Mr. Vitaly Hatzeluk, the National Manager of Programs on the League of Reforms and Coordinator Projects of the OSCE in Ukraine. Mr. Vitaly, I would like to give the word to you. Good day, colleagues. You're welcome to this extraordinary event, and I can only join my colleagues who were representing before, because this reform is one of the most complicated. At the same time, it's one of the most important reforms, and I should know that within the framework of their organization, we were a part of some of the aspects of the development of some of the ideas which were the base of this draft law. We went the members of the work group, which was mentioned today, and we have to give the the proper contribution to the result that the group had, and at the same time during the draft project works, during different forums and events, of some scientific events, during some meetings, so we can discuss very important moments, for example, the legal, the constitutional, and different other issues on the legislation, which would be the base of the future legal regulation of the relations in the work of the SSU. And I should note that the last year, our colleagues from the human rights institutions, this is the institution of the OSCE in Warsaw, and from the security service of Ukraine have provided the finances for the reforming of the SSU, and all of the reports on the website. I would kindly ask you to get acquainted with the results, with the reports, as they give the proper material for the analysis and for taking into consideration. I would like to say that all the discussion we are having today did not appear yesterday, and the positions are quite known, and it wasn't from nothing. We have to take into consideration the context where the criminal jurisdiction was appearing with the law enforcement system, and for the last 30 years, and all the situation and conditions that were in Ukraine, and the service and the SSU of Ukraine is famous, and you know all of the drawbacks, and you know all the issues about the reforming in this sphere, all of the recommendation and the results and the ideas, including with our international partnerships that were started. They are not out of nothing. They all come from different kinds of the international relationships, as well as obligation within the OSCE, and also the point of view of all of the 50 state participants, state members. So we should include the gender issues, and we should take it into consideration that such issues come from the documents from the decisions of the Council of the UN. And the final point is that during the work on the draft law, we should include the constitutional and the legal issues to give the base. So in the future, the elaborated document might be the reason for the discussion at the court, but we need to make the guarantees that all of the norms would meet all of the demands of the Constitution of Ukraine. I would like to join the position of my colleagues, because the competence of the SSU and the issue of the data storage, the issue of the control and surveillance on the work of the SSU and the staff members, administration and management, and gender mainstreaming is an issue of it. These are the important issues which were the part of the document because of the results of the different decisions of the international organizations. And we have all of the reasons to stick to the legislation and to include it when working on the draft law on the second reading, and to include all of the issues we have to include. And I believe it's possible. And I wish to all of you good luck. And we, on our behalf, in any format, would be ready to join the work on the corresponding legislative initiative. Thank you so much. Mr. Vitaly, thank you so much. And I would like to give the floor to Yulia Gorbunova, a Human Rights Watch representative who was studying this draft legislation. So Yulia, you're welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Sasha. Thank you for the opportunity to speak at this very important event. And let me just start by echoing what my colleague said, that this reform is considered to be one of the most significant reforms in the context of combating corruption in Ukraine. And we at Human Rights Watch, as an international group, frequently hear about this reform in meetings with Ukraine's partners and allies, where it is almost universally presented as a positive development. And it's mentioned in the context of Ukraine making significant progress in fighting corruption and strengthening the rule of law. And it's presented as a big achievement of President Zelensky's administration. In recent years, Ukraine's partners and allies have pushed for the reform of the SBU. And in fact, in 2019, the US Congress voted to condition half of American defense assistance to Ukraine on adoption of a bill that laid the groundwork for reform of the security service. It is understandable because, as my colleagues have mentioned, and as you all know, SBU is one of the least reformed agencies, government agencies in Ukraine. It's, I think, the largest security agency in Europe. It combines counterintelligence functions with law enforcement functions. And it basically has a lot on its plate. It has a very problematic unit, Directorate K, which deals with organized crime. It's been implicated in human rights abuses over the years. Security service in Ukraine remains a direct descendant of the Soviet KGB, and despite the long time of operating independently, it hasn't been able to adapt to the new reality. So that heritage is really weighing it down, and the reform is definitely long overdue. I would like to flag that as an agency, it faced allegations of abuse of power over the years, which really tarnished its reputation, including accusations of blackmail, corruption, arms trafficking, and running secret detention centers and using torture, which is something that we've also documented along with other human rights groups. So those scandals affected the credibility of SBU quite a lot. And the reform that international partners have been pushing for involves stripping SBU of some of its functions, sort of narrowing down its focus and making it more sort of traditional intelligence agency, which would focus on more traditional intelligence agency functions, such as counter-espionage and counterterrorism, cybersecurity. The reform also suggests or strives to demilitarize SBU and cut down on staff and remove SBU from investigating economic crimes. However, there are serious problems with the reform. The time to talk about it is now, so we're thrilled that we're having this discussion now. And some of the aspects that I would like to flag, which we share concern on with human rights groups and experts in Ukraine, have to do with the fact that in the current form, the draft law actually allows SBU to retain a lot of its problematic functions. It gives it very vast powers, which can be used against opposition, journalists, civic activists. As I mentioned, it allows SBU to actually retain law enforcement functions and continue to investigate corruption and smuggling cases. And I would like to also flag a particular concern of ours is the freedom of expression, implications for freedom of expression, because under this legislation, SBU will be given very wide powers to have pretty much unrestricted access to government databases, obtain personal information upon request, revoke licenses of TV and radio broadcasters under threat of national security. National security is defined so broadly that the definition is potentially limitless. And we also share concern voiced by others on this call about a lack of safeguards, lack of human rights safeguards in the draft law against human rights violations and very little oversight. I would like to also flag one more concern. Appears to be not enough open and transparent debate around this legislation, where voices of Ukrainian civil society experts, lawyers, rule of law experts being heard. And I'd just like to finish by saying that we all know that Ukraine is currently at war. It continues to face the threat of military aggression from Russia, and it needs the best tools to strengthen its rule of law, to make it more resilient in the face of this aggression. And for that reason, it's time to reform this agency and do it right, so it doesn't become a missed opportunity. Thank you.
Дуже дякую, Юлія.
Thank you so much, Julia. And here we should finish the first panel. Now we should come to the second one. And now the vision of different sectors on the draft law 3196D. And the threats and the opportunities and the vision on the reforms. And we would like to start. And I would give the word to Ivan Zakharov, the chief of the Kharkiv Human Rights Advocacy Company. You're welcome. Thank you so much, Alyssa. Good day. I have, on the contrary to the other speakers today, I have the vision of this draft law is quite sad and critical. I believe that all of the paradigmatic decisions that were at the base in the draft legislation that were in the first reading weren't changed for the second reading, and such decisions can cause catastrophic consequences. There are three decisions. The first one is the substantial empowerment of the counterintelligence and directing it to work against the citizens rather than the aggressive country. Looking under this veil of the counterintelligence and instead of the work with the organized criminals, they did not do this. So the liquidated K division got reincarnated, so the KGB got reincarnated, but has changed the face. But they would have great empowerments provided by this complex of the draft laws and the amendments to the 36 projects and the empowerments they didn't have before. And at the same time, the limitations that were in the legislation on the law enforcement activity, and now they are absent. I don't know how to get rid of such a situation. And the second paradigmatic decision is the influence of the SSU that is offered in this draft law, and how many new functions and powers appear, and particularly the substantial influence, significant influence of SSU on the personnel appointment of the state incumbents. What about the legislation? What will happen if this draft law passes? None of the A or B category personnel incumbent would not be able to be appointed without the SSU. None of the prosecutor general, but for prosecutor general, would be appointed without SSU. So SSU decision would be important in all of the cases. In fact, the absence of any control and surveillance over the work of the SSU, and even that shorthand prosecutor general control nowadays in the draft law is cancelled, and the court control is shortened, and the court was also expressing such a point of view, and the procedure that is written in the legislation and the agreement and all of the actions that are supposed to be by the court are violated, and there is no civic control, and civic control is shortly limited. And upon the whole, this draft law is not sufficient for me. I believe it legitimates the transition of the SSU into KGB by means of such empowerment and the opportunity to act without any control or surveillance. And the work would be appointed at the citizens rather than at the aggressive countries. It doesn't exist in any of the civic or developed countries. So I feel very doubtful about this draft law. Thank you, Yevhen Yukhimovic. I would like to give the word to the dissident, the head of the Jewish organizations and the settlements of Ukraine. Mr. Yosef, you're welcome. The floor is yours. Good day, dear participants of the conference. I'm grateful for your invitation. I'm not the specialist on control over draft laws of the SSU, but at one time I had quite a long experience of communicating, long and unpleasant experience of communicating with KGB. I would like, first of all, I trust the analysis that was provided by Yevhen Zakharov, because we have been knowing each other for decades, and I know how carefully they write down all of their remarks to the new draft laws. And from what I know from this draft law, I agree with his assessment and remarks on great threats that exist in this draft law. And I would like to say some general remarks that with all the great job you are doing right now, the human rights advocacy companies, and it's much more extended and deeper than what we called the human rights some 40, 50 years ago. But Ukraine in particular and other countries known from the former USSR, we have left the non-legal space. That is why when we're speaking about some draft laws, they should be not only carefully be written down, all the provisions, not to have any double meaning, but we have to think about the implementation of the legislation, because in 30 years of the independence, different Verkhovna Radas have already implemented hundreds, thousands of legislations. The issue is not whether those laws are good or bad. We want the laws to be good, but the laws are not implemented, they're not exercised, because we do not live in the legal space where the legislation is one of the most important categories of the society. Besides, we can see that every government coming to Ukraine, instead of making different state institutions, particularly SSU, independent, professional, I would even rather say first professional, then independent, and those who should guard the human rights and the citizen and the freedoms, they all try to adopt the state institutional, particularly SSU, to their private corporative interests. And we should prevent this with the assistance of the civic society and human rights advocacy associations. State institutions, no country can be imagined. Strong and independent institutions are the base of move of any country into the future, the sustainable movement. We could see the presidents, for example, in the USA, there were strange people or not strange people, right or left parties. The state institutions in the USA hold the development of the country and hold it and make it sustainable. And no matter how strange president you are, you cannot influence the work of the institutions. Instead of for 60 years to build different state institutions, which could be the base for the substantial movement of the Ukraine in the future, we can see the reform team of the services for different needs. And we should deal with this. We should deal somehow against this. Unfortunately, I have to say that your time is out, and I would kindly ask you to finish. I will finish. And once I've asked this question in the group on the 1st of December, the human rights advocates should work and deliberate a kind of a tactic of the country existence within the framework of the military conflict. And the human rights advocates would offer the restrictions and should offer how to work with restrictions and limitation in some particular conditions, and everything should work within the legal framework. Thank you for the attention. Thank you, Mr. Yosef. And as the legislation aims at removing the powers of the SSU, as it's written in press, to interfere into the economy, we have invited a few speakers who are the specialists in the anti-corruption sphere. I would like to give the word to Elena Sherbany, the Anti-Corruptional Center. Dear colleagues, good day. Indeed, our organization, the Center of Anti-Corruption Work, we have been in this draft law topic, and we have got interested in this topic when we have noticed that the powers of the SSU in the anti-corruption sphere contradict the functionality of the anti-corruptional bodies. And as for today, we in fact can monitor and trace the reforms. And what is more, all the time we can inform the society on this movement, and we believe this reform extremely important to be the key one in the sector of the security of our country, and what should lead Ukraine finally, and to make it to be an important step to the European North Atlantic Organization, to NATO. And we have to start with the positive side. And the advantage is that during all of the years of independence, the reform of the SSU finally got on the table of the parliament members. It has never happened before, and it's an important step for us, for the parliament, for the state to start talking, to discuss this issue, the reforming of the SSU. And we should mention that today the state service, security service of Ukraine is a multitask body authority which combines not only anti-corruptional functions, counterintelligence, regulatory some functions. And it reminds me the story of Libo about 3 different animals when their service is trying to move in different direction, but all that cart with the problem stayed at the same place. Unfortunately, the service is multifunctional. That is why it cannot move its cart with the problem, and it grows more and more, just like a snowball. So the issue of the reform is urgent. And if we talk about the attempt to solve it, in fact, the first version of the draft law was applied a year ago. For a year, we have been discussing this, and the first version looked just like an attempt to fix this multifunctional and to legitimate it. But it was elaborated, and the version was elaborated in the second reading, in the first reading, and it was that, despite all of the drawbacks, and I agree with all the previous speakers, there are many issues, extremely important issues, and they weren't solved after the first reading, but we insist that these problems are important, and we should be optimistic that such problems can be solved, and this should be the sense of the reform, the reason of the reform. That is why we hope and expect, and today I had an opportunity with the Mariana Bezukhova, the chief of the working group. The pre-final text was published for the committee reading. There are some improvements, but still there are so many problems. That is why I'm sure that the parliament should vote for the reform in the best edition. And today we're here to discuss this for all of our remarks to publicly describe. As talking about the multitasking, unfortunately, the time is out. I would kindly ask you to sum up. Definitely, we understand that today the key field and the military situation, and by means of the intelligence, by means of this intelligence, the SSU could interfere into the different spheres, just like anti-corruption sphere, but the parliament members still leave the huge field of work for the SSU to still work in the same way as we indeed have to make it all work simultaneously. And no matter how formally we get rid of anti-corruption and rid of corruption, if we have the SSU without any changes, it would be an unsolved issue, and probably the bad situation could be caused by non-reforming the SSU. Thank you. And I would like to give the word to one more expert, Olena Trevolko, the General Secretary of NATO Transparency International.
Olena, the floor is yours. Thank you so much. I will be very brief. We all understand that, like all the other speakers, how this law is very important for Euro-Atlantic integration, but our organization, NACO, is looking at the aspects that are kind of smaller, which the previous speakers told, for example, taking away the investigative function, or some safeguards on human rights. We looked at how this law will give the residents of Ukraine access to information. And we see that actually the law draft has a discrepancy about public information access. And there are also several collisions between the norms and regulations of this project. And we see that now, as it is, this draft law does not give an opportunity for a proper control and supervision over SSU. That is why our organizations and others that are also included here, we gave some amendments to this reading in order to improve the access to public information, to guarantee the openness of declarations of the property declarations of the managers of SSU, also about public control of it. We also would like to drive your attention to the monopoly of secrecy and management of state secret, because now SSU is important, is responsible about which information goes to be secret and what kind of information will it be, and also makes decisions about the access to this. So probably really this is quite excessive about also this new law about access to public information that is also being developed now. We also paid attention to the fact that in this law draft, there are no mechanisms about whistleblowers within SSU itself. Because if the information, if there is information that is state secret, there could be the facts about some infringements of law on corruption. There has to be this law on anti-corruption law. But here we have the gap. And we also suggested to somehow remake it. And another thing, we found out that SSU can also have these discretive authorities, as Mr. Zakharov said, that there will be prosecutors and also officials of A and B categories will be under influence of SSU. And we paid attention to that MPs as well will be under the control of SSU about access to the state secrets. And these authorities, this discretion does not have any safeguards. We will need to know how this MP will be independent. So these were our amendments from our organization. They are being analyzed. Not all of them are accepted. We are not very happy about it. Thank you, Elena. I would like to give the word to Ksenia Velichko, the American Chamber of Commerce. So thank you very much. The members of the American Chamber of Commerce really are waiting for this reform. I wouldn't like to repeat myself because there were a lot of amendments that have been told. We also gave some written amendments to the text of the first reading, and then we will also look through the deputy one. We also spoke about the repeating of the authorities, about economic authorities. So we observe the situation, we give our proposals, we work in the work of the committee, and if needed, we can also provide our expertise, because we have about, in our union, more than 3,000 lawyers, and the amendments have been taken into consideration. Thank you. There are a lot of authorities in this draft law about freedom of expression, especially in the internet. I would like to Oksana Romaniuk to speak about the position on the media. Thank you. Hello, dear colleagues. My colleagues already spoke about some considerations, and really this option for the draft law, we do not have these foreseen blocking of a website, but we still have risks. First of all, the first one is the subduction of SSU to the president of Ukraine, which gives a lot of power to the president, and there is no balance of power here. The second one is about collecting private life, also intercepting the channels of communication. And the third one, media experts have a lot of questions about amendments to the to TV and radio broadcasting, because there we have the organizations and companies cannot be accessed for propaganda of terrorism or whatever. We do not have the definition for it, and who will define this is a big question, or other actions that are directed to the breaking the foundations of safety and international world or order. Is it about reptile conspiracy or something? We don't know. Colleagues, in the parliament, we already have a new draft law about media, and the changes to the very law of radio and TV broadcast, they are outdated, because there will be the new law, and it is very detailed about national safety, etc. So I suggest that this very element can be taken away from this law, because it's written in other legislation. So thank you, Oksana. I would like to give it to Popova, of the Chamber of Television. Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank Mr. Zakharov, because I agree with everything he said, from the first to the last word. This draft law does not have the right to live in the second reading. It cannot be remade. It has to be rewritten from the scratch in order to make it better. Speaking about our work, about communications, speaking about blocking, yes, they took into consideration, but SSU still has 7 days for the right when there is a decision of the appeal judge to get into the court, but never to receive the decision afterwards. So they can actually block Telegram channels, which is really not possible. Speaking about interception of communication, we have the working group now that is working at a new draft law about interception, and we already have the first draft that we are going to work at next week. Our law enforcement authorities really want to get two new laws. The first one is about interception, that they can actually intercept any information from the channels of communication. And the second, about the principles. I'm going to share these principles to you that we are going to adhere to with this law. And the second is the convention about crime that was ratified 10 years ago, but still articles from 16 to 20, they are not implemented to our criminal code, and law enforcement authorities cannot work because of that. They not only can they work themselves, but also cooperate with the international community on the issues of urgent keeping of data and data on the traffic, as it is done in the Convention of Cyber Security. Thank you. So in general, nobody should be worried that we are working at this law of interception. I'm going to send it to the chat. Thank you. Since this is about election project, we also asked Olga from Opora to help us with this. Olga, the floor is yours. Olga Ivazovska, are you here with us? Can you hear us? Certainly there is a problem, she just wrote to me. And I would like to give our next speaker that represents IT community. It's important for us to know what it is about them, the organizer of the forum, Ukrainian Web Development Championship, and the co-founder of the company We Challenge. Evgenia, the floor is yours. Sorry, do we have Evgenia Bespalova-Malych? Do we also hear Olga Ivazovska? Yes, I can hear you. Sorry, I had some communication problem. Speaking about this draft law, I would like to say that our organization, first of all, is worried about increasing of the authorities as far as elections are concerned, because this law changes the Part 3 of Article 213 of the Election Code, and SSU has to report certain candidates that also will work in the like separatists, terrorist activities. That's why CEC won't be able to get registered, and that's why we can speak that without any confirmation, these people will be deprived of being registered with the CEC. That's why we have a problem here, especially if we speak about one mandate constituencies, and this kind of thing is cannot be there, because there are authorities that are responsible for these activities, and SSU never had such work before. Thank you, Olga. And now, Evgenia Bespalova-Malych, if you can hear us, please. Great. Thank you. I was invited as a business representative, and I've been doing business for more than 10 years already, and my business is IT, and I've been lucky to be witness communicating with SSU, and that was about searches, liquidation of servers. I had an honor to speak to SSU when I was a student because I was a proactive activist. So my speech will be mostly emotional. I analyzed what the Center of Civic Freedoms said. I agree with them, and I really would like to speak to get all the people to get to know this. It's very positive that we already have this issue in our agenda. Not only do we have it in the agenda, let's work, let's do it professionally. It's a shame to say that since 2014, this authority has been the biggest violator of the human rights. Whenever we speak with the colleagues from the US, China, or whatever, when we speak about the development of software, and you tell them you are in Ukraine, and we still have the norms, moral norms, some abuses of this authority. And because of these abuses, you really don't feel very comfortable. It's like medieval ages. So I told you that it would be emotional. And I really would like you to change this situation, to make it for the better and make it professional. And for my 3 minutes of this, I really support the Board of Center for Civil Liberties and would like to change it. Thank you, Evgenia. We are finishing the second panel. I'm giving the floor to Ivan Fursenko. We actually thought that Mariana Bezula was supposed to speak about this project, but I, as moderator to moderator, they asked to give the floor to Dmytro Lubinets, the MP of Ukraine. He has something to say there. Hello. Dear colleagues, I'm Ivan Fursenko. I will moderate the third panel, and taking into consideration about the recent data, Mr. Lubinets, tell us about the law, draft 3196D, and what you understand about the reforms of this. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you for giving me the floor. And the committee is going to work very soon. So it won't take long that I will work. First of all, I think that, as many of my colleagues, the reform of SBO won't happen. Probably some point changes, but it won't be a reform. Vice versa, I just call it an illusion to reform. Why? First of all, the reform is very important now because SSU is considered to be the most corruptive authority in Ukraine. And by this draft law, and by the 2025, this service will be working with smuggling, which is also very corruptive. And with this law, we still have the appointment of all the territorial designated officials, it seems that SSU will have the authority that will be subdued to the president, which will be also this. I also would like to speak about the human rights. First of all, about apprehension of a person. This has to be done only on the investigation that was done by SSU, not everything of this. So if a person can be apprehended on any criminal case, and the second thing is that nobody makes these SSU people to report the relatives or the lawyer that the person was detained. So if a person was detained and this person can be lost for their loved ones and nobody knows where this person will be. The next one is about the isolators in SSU system. They have to be liquidated, or at least they have to be visited by the ombudsman and see how it is done. Third, the procedure of receiving data or information from other authorities and physical persons. Here, if we speak about any person, physical person is obliged to give this information. It's either voluntarily or by the court. And in this law, it says that the person has to do it anyway. So there are some discrepancies here. I agree that this law cannot be rectified, cannot be amended by the second reading. I'm still sure that probably it won't get enough votes to get accepted.
Now let's listen to the points of view of the co-author of the draft law, the Member of Parliament, Mariana Bezuk. Ms. Mariana, are you with us? Ms. Mariana is somewhere out. Now I would like to give the word two times Chief of the SSU, the Member of Parliament, Mr. Valentin Nalaychenko. Good day, dear colleagues. You all understood from the previous speech that was absent that there is no speech and no reform of the SSU. So like a paradox or joke. All of the participants, this is not the presidential draft law, this is the deputy's draft law, and the national deputy, Mariana Bezukhova. I was expecting to tell you sincerely what have they created this and law, and I believe in this position, and I agree with Mr. Evgen and with all of you colleagues that the draft law was written down as the one that preserves the SSU law enforcement power, and this is the basic problem. If the draft law is created and this status is kept, there would be the investigating functions and the economy issues and many other issues, and my colleagues have already mentioned everything. I will not spend time, and this is negative. What should be done to write down clearly that SSU should be the chief counter-intelligence office and anti-terroristic office. The deputies have not done this. Probably there would be the error, and probably the deputies would perform and express why has it happened. And the second reading, the draft law, and I have counted 8 times in the text, it was mentioned the economic crimes and economic as itself. This is the answer. What the economic function would leave the SSU, 8 times it was mentioned, then it means no, it will be there. And what I will insist during the second reading, I will do everything what depends on me. I have registered the amendments, at least for the investigation office, not as it's written right now before the next presidential elections, and then it could be postponed. Why should we do this? The State Bureau of Investigation was created 2 years ago. The Bureau of Economic Security was created. And what else? Why else should we keep the function of investigation? And I have already prepared and registered this amendment. I will insist on the future classification of the information as not secret and the complete access to the digitalized databases of all civic organizations, NGOs, citizens, and scientists. These are the primary amendments ideas. Will the government join me? I don't know. Probably I would apply to you. What are your thoughts? And we have to apply the conclusions to the members of the parliament for them to take the responsibility and to honestly answer. Will this be included? Will the SSU reformed? Or again, the functions would be extended or it would be empowered? Will it be changed? I have stuck to 3 minutes. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Valentin. Thank you for sticking for the regiment. We have the round table to consolidate the point of view and to direct them directly to the members of the parliament. Now we would like to listen to Ms. Anastasia Radina, the member of the parliament, and her ideas on the draft law 31/960. Ms. Anastasia. Somewhere she is not with us. Roman Kostenko, the national deputy, the member of the parliament. Mr. Roman, unfortunately, he must be out somewhere. This is your attitude of the members of the parliament to you, but I'm a national deputy as well, and the chief, and the member of the SSU, and I'm present here. Mr. Serhiy, then you're welcome. If you would allow me, I'm grateful for the opportunity to participate in such an honorable discussion. As for the SSU, it's extremely important to listen to the point of view of the expert representatives of the citizens, our international partners who represent the international organizations and missions, and the representatives of such organizations in Ukraine, and the reflection of what problems exist and the issues which probably not the proper attention is paid to. We have to pay the proper attention. And it's extremely pleasant to me that the SSU reforms are paid so much attention to. We support most of the remarks. At the same time, we have to, after listening to this discussion, I've got scared of this structure, the structure I work in, because only the negative issues raise up and the positive disappears. All the positive sides that the officers do every day, and everything what the officers do in the eastern part of Ukraine when contracting the Russian Federation aggression. Sometimes it's not mentioned, but I would love this discussion to be objective, and we have to pay attention to such fact, and we have to conquer the dragon. And to conquer the dragon is a nice phrase, but not always we direct the discussion in the proper way. Not always it happens. And I would like to pay your attention, my dear colleagues, that we have to call for attention and probably emphasize the things that are not that important in the draft law. For example, the law enforcement functions. And my dear colleagues and the national deputies, members of the parliament, understand that the presence of the law enforcement is a characteristic of some particular special services, especially those who dealt with the same challenges and threats that face the state SSU and the Ukrainian countries. For example, the Baltic countries, there is only one special service. This is the informational service, and it combines the counterintelligence and the intelligence function. And the second one is the investigation function. The Scandinavian model of the special services foresees the pre-trial investigation of the special services. We shouldn't mention that the presence of these or that empowerments would negatively affect this SSU. And I would like to support the words of the human rights advocates. We have to provide the proper control over the work of the SSU, not to have the abuses of the rights and abuses of the functions. and we should use the best experience existing today. And probably I would open the secret, but many European countries, European special services start to come back into the counter-intelligence protection of the country, and they understand that in the modern the hybrid world has the hybrid threats, and the base, the grounds of the terroristic activity or of the transnational organizations is financed by the shadow economic schemes. And in this case, I would like to call you to treat critically the issue of elimination the power of the SSU of the economic issues investigation, because the key interests of the Ukrainian economic issues and the SSU participation in the investigation of the economic issues is extremely important. Mr. Sri would kindly ask you to stick to the regiment. And the co-author of the draft law, the national deputy, Ms. Mariana Bezugla, has joined us. Please tell your point of view on this draft law, for everyone present would be able to hear your vision and to see the vision of the co-authors, co-founders of this draft law. Can you hear me? There were some issues with the sound. Not just a co-author, I'm the chief of the project of the reforming of the SSU. I was delegated by the committee, and I'm responsible for the working group, for the forming of the project, for the preparation to the second reading, all of the comments on the quality of the draft law. All of the comments, please send them to me. It's about me. And a few remarks on this. You have heard, I would say it in slang, one of the best representatives, one of the ambassadors of the SSU was presenting the draft law, has passed the first reading, and our partners within the framework of the Euro-Atlantic integration, upon the whole, the logic and the conscientious and the work with the citizens and the norms of empowerment on all the issues. And as the dinosaurs, the representatives of the SSU would say that the economic empowerments and the other investigating powers, they're speaking like they were the old people. And we have seen the green light. The legislation is to work. What is the complication is for me? What is so difficult about my work? The SSU uses the other languages for the citizens, for the parliament, for the level of the resilience is extremely low. At the same time, the social service of Ukraine has an extremely important powers which should be preserved, as they protect our sovereignty and the safety of our country. And we have to see what were the results of the 2014, and we should see the consequences and take it into consideration when speaking about the intelligence for the sake of Ukraine. It wasn't reformed in 2014, and the legislation of 1992 is the inert law to trace somehow from the totalitarian system, from those services. But the paradox, the issue is that in 1990s, it was quite more a special service than what we have of SSU right now. Then it was gaining different function, corruptional risks, and what I got remember from 2014, there was some particular progress in directing, first of all, the counterintelligence. And now, when I can hear all of the critics, let's work constructively. In what way? There are the representatives from I have the representatives of the forum in my working group. So everything you have sent, we have included this before the second reading. And today we have published the draft law, which is for 90% of what will be considered by the committee. This is my personal decision. I have taken this in order to, before the committee reading, to publicate all of the draft law for the Ukrainians. So you could get used with it, get familiar, read it, and you could keep in touch with me and the channels of communication are quite simple. You can write me in Messenger. I run it by myself and you will directly communicate with me. And the second one, you could send your remarks to my email. It was mentioned that there were the application on media and political parties. We have included the issues received from the letters from the NGOs, and it was extremely important to emphasize the proper issues that form the structure of this special service. And we have to provide a qualitative draft law. And Nalyvaichenko has mentioned that he will insist on the further publication of the archives, but we have already included this. Don't insist on it. You have to read to participate in the working group. That is why I would call you, using this opportunity, that there was an overlap. We have the forum and many stakeholders. The people interested in it are here, the representatives of the citizens, and from the experts, there were the representatives of the parliament. Please download the draft law, publicated draft law, and I'm waiting for your feedbacks. And this is the window of opportunities, and it's a week of time. Let's work pragmatically for the week, because such attitudes have never been implemented. There has never been such direct connection. Such a huge project has never been publicated beforehand. In short, I'm not sure whether I have occupied 3 minutes. I don't have a timer. Thank you, Ms. Mariana, for your speech. And I would like to use the opportunity. Happy birthday to you. Thank you so much. We would like to wish you strong health and to reach you all of your goals. Dear participants of the forum, now we come to the open part, to the open discussion, and I would like to use the opportunity. One more remark. I apologize for the feedback. I would kindly ask the organizers of the forum to provide us the record of the forum, or it could be the link for the online version, because there are some different comments and we will elaborate the comments. We will see what we have taken into consideration, what we have to elaborate, what we should process before packing the changes, as to say, packing the changes to the draft law. And Ms. Mariana, I would kindly ask you not to turn off. Probably some of the present people, the participants, would have some questions to the authors of the draft laws. Now we come to the open part. So you're welcome to the open microphone. You're welcome with your questions. I would like to earn your attention that in chat there were some particular questions, particularly from Ali Safarov, and you can take the word and answer the question. And I have promised to give the word to Oksana Nechiporenko, one of the first, who was one of the first in our first blog. She has asked about it in advance, and the floor is yours, and you're welcome. Tell the moderators who would like to be the next one. Dear colleagues, my name is Oksana Nestorenko. I represent the Multidisciplinary Scientific Center, and I used to work with the Kharkiv Advocacy Group, and for 16 years I have been dealing with the access to information and the balance between the openness, accessibility, and the national security. And I will not say everything for the second time. In a few words, I would like to say that I agree with all of my colleagues and the representative of the civil society, and concerning the threats that the draft law has, as from the point of view of the human rights advocacy, from the point of view of the openness and accountability and the expertise our center has been dealing with, the corruptional risks. And this draft law has high risks because of the closeness and transparency, and all of the provisions are kept in the text we are having right now, which in the text which was publicated by Ms. Mariana, and we should include the offers on transparency that were offered by Ms. Olena, the executive director of NACO. And what if we're having a discussion? How could you analyze the 120 pages draft law in 2 hours? How was it possible? How could you do this? And everything's preserved. As a moderator, I would kindly ask you to do it one by one. If we're having discussion, I would kindly ask all of the speakers to for it to be comfortable, convenient, please write down in your question in the chat so we could figure out who would be the speaker, as in Zoom it would be inconvenient to interrupt each other. I would like to answer. I have analyzed all of the offers. There were not so many of them on the transparency of online declarations of the high officials, and also the open of the information on the state secret, and probably there would be the information on the state corruption and on the legislation on the access to the public information. We have applied up to 10 amendments, but they were on the complex tasks and goals and the balance. And none of the amendments were included in no way. We didn't analyze the whole draft law, the whole document. We have analyzed in 2 hours. We have analyzed the issues concerning our amendments, which could provide the balance. And unfortunately, we can see that none of the amendments were included, even though they were applied both from the committee, by the deputies, by the members of the parliaments, and by the anti-corruptional center, and our center particularly, and ARCO and other subjects, and nothing was included. These were the key amendments. And Ms. Mariana, we believe that you are our colleague and partner from the civil society who we do rely on, that we hope that you will help us for the amendments to be included, as it's extremely dangerous now for this draft law. Unfortunately, provides a curtain of secrecy to the SSU, and it's an extreme threat, including the rest of the threats spoken out by the rest of the speakers. And we hope for the discussion and that all of the amendments would be included. There are not so many of them, but these are the key amendments, the issues on the transparency and accountability. Ms. Oksana, we would kindly ask you to finish. That's it as for now. That is why, Ms. Mariana, I would like to listen to your point of view about your point of view. How can the amendments be included? I would give the word to Ms. Mariana, and then the representative of the OEC will have the opportunity to speak up. Ms. Mariana, you're welcome. The draft law was published, and 90% of what was at the committee at 3 p.m. Now we have 5:30. With all my respect, please check the document carefully, and we have to remember that we create the special service, but not the law enforcement body. And much was mentioned on how the law enforcement authorities should be controlled. The special service is not to be controlled, only within the framework of its law enforcement functions. This special service hardly has any law enforcement powers, and it's extremely difficult for us to create this special provisions. But SSU is not a special service. It has the function of the SSU and some features, and we plan to have within the framework of the Constitution, not changing the Constitution, to create such a special service. And because only the law enforcement bodies and the special service can work in that way, and we provide the demilitarization. And this is quite strange that no one got interested in this issue, because this is the issue on the development of the civic democratic control when the militaries do not work as a part of the special service, almost the complete demilitarization, when the law enforcement functions are taken away, and the efficiency of the special service is the work not about the investigation, but the work for being quick and having no cases, no criminal cases, and no legal supervision would be there. It would be implemented in the other format. And on the law enforcement functions that partially are state, I would like to comment on this. A few words, that is why I have mentioned, and we should all understand what is this special service. We have to understand what is this. There were extremely interesting comments from the representatives of the NATO and the OSCE. Commands were extremely important, and they have the special services, and it's an extremely important question. And the communication with the civic society, we all have to accept, and we have to learn to accept what is the special service and what are they empowered for. They're not controlled through the trials, not the open investigating cases. They're controlled by the parliament. They're controlled by the president, but the president's function also segregated. Please be careful about the functions of the president and the members of the parliament. Please check the draft law and all of the feedbacks I will receive in 2 hours. I have been receiving a huge amount of feedbacks, and in a week it would be an active dialogue. So probably this is the last point. The call to the organizers of the forum. What forum do you see for our dialogue? How can we have a couple of negotiations and meetings at least this week to find the consensus of the understanding of the risks and to define the risks? And I'm ready to join. We had the plenary week. We can do it early in the evening, early in the morning, late in the night, up to you. I'm always ready to contact with you. Thank you, Ms. Mariana, and I would like to give you the word of BDL OSCE.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, colleagues. I don't have a specific question in mind, but I would like to make a brief remark. My name is Nadika Rajaratnam, and I work within the Legislative Support Unit of ODIHR covering this topic. Thank you for the organizers for setting up this interesting roundtable. I've listened with great interest to the presentations today, and we want to express that we appreciate the opportunity we have been given to provide our legal analysis. As my colleague Vasily had mentioned earlier, I would like to thank the authorities for this request, as well as our field mission colleagues for their support. You can find both our legal reviews, which we provided on the draft concept, as well as of the draft law, both in English and Ukrainian, on our online legal database called legislationline.org. I'd like to most importantly echo what previous speakers have said, namely that ODIHR believes that this reform is of great importance. And at the same time, we reiterate, we made about 13 recommendations in our legal review, and we reiterate our concern expressed therein with respect to many provisions in the draft law in light of the OSCE commitments, human rights, and the rule of law. Finally, let me just briefly say that we stand ready to continue our assistance wherever needed in support of this reform process. Thank you.
Дуже дякую нашим колегам з ОБСЄ.
Thank you, our colleagues from OSCE. Thank you for the analysis of the draft law, and you can go to their website and get acquainted with their ideas. And we have the National Deputy, Anastasia Radina. I would kindly give her a word.
Дякую дуже, шановні колеги. Я щиро перепрошую, що не змогла включитися в рамках попередньої панелі, не мала засідання комітету, яке також затягнулося. Сподіваюся, це було плідне обговорення. Власне, я би хотіла поділитися кількома думками щодо того, яким я бачу законопроект про Службу безпеки України на друге читання. Я бачу два великих блоки завдань в реформі Служби безпеки України. З одного боку, це позбавлення Служби безпеки невластивих повноважень, а саме тих повноважень, які не характерні спецслужбам країн НАТО. І другий блок, я мушу сказати, що бачу необхідність у виключенні багатьох норм законопроекту, які були наявні в редакції першого читання, які розширюють повноваження Служби безпеки України або створюють певні потенційно ризиковані, з моєї точки зору, неконтрольовані повноваження Служби безпеки України. Почну, власне, з першого завдання щодо реформування Служби безпеки України у відповідності до найкращих стандартів, відповідності найкращих практик, швидше було правильно сказати, відповідних служб країн НАТО. Я знаю, що в рамках обговорення цього питання дуже часто колеги посилаються, наприклад, Польщі, де Служба безпеки, де аналог Служби безпеки має також і правоохоронні функції. Разом
experience, where the counterpart service, they have also law enforcement security. I really would like to say that it's not a very good example. I'm sorry to our colleagues. Probably this is not very good example. I think that this has to be, this service has to be deprived of law enforcement functions, and it's also doesn't have to have the investigative authorities. We unfortunately see that we still have this availability of such things. In the interim regulations, we will see the cessation or suspension of them. I think that it's not right. I really don't understand why we include this into the investigative functions of SSU. It has to be excluded, probably only in the interim regulations. It has to be registered there, and exactly and precisely when they will be finished. The second thing, the group of the draft law about the authorities of SSU to send the orders actually to establish the rights on the rights and freedoms of people, especially by some secret orders and decrees. I really don't understand, softly speaking, about these regulations, that the SSU can interrogate people receiving their accord without actually giving them the aim of such an interrogation. I think that it's a discrepancy, because I, as a physical person, can give my accord or reject it. So all this block is the key one, but there are also some important ones that have to be excluded. So as this reform of SSU is reformed well and oriented into the functions of counterintelligence, where the maximum taking away the law enforcement functions without turning this SSU into the monster with possibilities of infringements of rights and liberties of people that could have been done in the first reading. Thank you, Anastasia. Dear participants, do you have any questions? If you do, show your hands or write in chat. Since we still have the participants, they can answer your questions. Here we have Ali Safarov. Hello, dear people. It's a great pleasure for me to take part in this discussion. If we analyze this draft law, or draft laws in general, starting from 3080 and then 3196, 3196-1 alternative, then 3196D with amendments. There are risks, but they have changed somehow. If we speak about 3080, SSU was like VCK of Dzerzhinsky time. A lot of things and norms were taken away already, but we still have one norm that is there to stay. The SSU is subdued to the president of Ukraine directly. So if we speak about SSU as serving to the people of Ukraine, but the norms of this law, we speak about the president with a lot of power in his hands, and taking into consideration the authorities and power that is given by all these draft laws and laws, we will have the precedent that the president will have the authoritarian type of power. Why do we still have this in all those draft laws? I would like to answer. Can you hear me, Mariana says? I will answer briefly. I would sustain you, but according to our constitution, it foresees this very work of SSU. In order to change it, we have to change the constitution. As of today, there is no vision or any changes with the majority of the Supreme Council or Verkhovna Rada that it can be changed. At least now we can start it. And the main thing here is about counterintelligence one, but now it's very good. And thank you that you guys stated that some norms became better. And it means that people already saw and read that version. I would like to get feedback. Thank you. First, I would like to give the word to Evgen Zakharov and then Netsvetaev. Thank you. Oh, I have a question to the authors of the draft law. I share the position. There has to be the special security service, not law enforcement authority. I agree with Anastasia that we need to take away the investigation and we need to take the law enforcement function. But I have a question. Who will do these very functions? Who is going to investigate the crimes that SSU is doing now? The option that we have now in the draft law, I really don't like it because now the state Bureau of Investigations is not able to investigate some of the things. They declared it, and we understand why. Because as far as I understand, the maximum number of employees is 1,600 people, and there are 400 investigators. These are too few people even to investigate the crimes on their competence or their jurisdiction, according to the criminal code. All of us know about the how much of this about the volatility of crimes, about different crimes on torture, cruel, inhumane treatment. And DBR is not able to solve it, even the ones that SSU is doing now. So it's not a decision. So now you are going to work at the second reading of it. It's interesting for me how you change the approach about transferring these functions. If there is a function in the state and you want to take from one authority to the other, if you just take it, you have to give it to somebody, and DBR is not very good for it. And those who actually provided the protection and defending of people who had this torture treatment, it's not solved. we heard this, and the authors of the draft law will be able to answer it. As far as I understand, we speak about this draft law. We have the Secretary of Intelligence. Unfortunately, Roman Kostenko cannot join us to comment on this, but taking into account that today we already published 90% ready the draft law that goes to the committee and to the parliament. Please familiarize yourselves. There are a lot of changes. We also have the transferring of the investigation functions to DBR and changing the investigators, etc. We have to understand, I actually encountered this question so much. The investigators have to be independent, and the value of it is being independent. If we speak about the legal work, we will close the risk of corruption, about closing the criminal case. So DBR was actually thought of as the only investigated authority, but they didn't become. They actually got some operative functions. Also, that's a closed circuit. We have to orient on something not that didn't work out, but actually that worked out. So gradually it will be transferred to DBR, and you will see that in my page. And it will be done by 1st of January 2025. And the configuration is that this investigative department can be within SSU, but they will be from DBR, and they will be actually independent. And this cycle will be working normally. This is something that we have to get to, and the transferring of this investigation will enable us to extend the investigative activity, and it will be done. It is very critical, and this is the very issue that has to be discussed, and we have to understand what is social the security case.
I would like to pay attention that Lehut has written a remark on the Constitution, particularly Article 106 on accountability, control, surveillance. They're not speaking about the guaranteeing the national security and the appointing and dismissal of the chief. In chat, we have a discussion. Please pay attention to this, and I would like to give the word to Johanna Tsvetaev. Good day, dear colleagues. I would like to raise such a kind of a global questions, not the global as it has been discussed, but this is the issue of the civil society surveillance over the SSU as within the framework of the cooperation with the different international programs. We participate in the project on the surveillance of the Special Service of Ukraine and the SSU. And this work basis on the order of the President of Ukraine since 2016, that the civil society can participate in the civic surveillance on the special services, and there can be such a formation as the Civic Council. But we have analyzed the situation. Such formation did exist, and even as for today, if I'm not mistaken, there is the unit in Lviv Oblast of SSU, but in the central authorities of the state government, such civil formation ceased its functioning. Indeed, we can treat in different ways such civic formations, whether they're effective or not, efficient or not. But let me do it quickly, as I have written already in the chat. I have to leave. We have the session. May I answer? Let me finish, please. Mr. Yevhan, there's a person who can answer the question. The person will leave, so you wouldn't have anyone to address to, so please let her speak. Ms. Mariana, you're welcome to answer. There is, once again, there were some problems with the connection. The issue was on the Civic Council, am I right? Civil controls, civil surveillance. Yes, I agree with you. We have brought back the Civil Council at the central government. In the regional, it's quite a discussive issue. The step was to have the Civic Council, as there is no council at all. We have to start with creating at least the Civil Council at the SSU. And I would love you to pay attention to the Parliament surveillance and control. There are quite many norms on how the Parliament should control the SSU, and the Parliament is the authorized body authorized by the citizens, and the civic control surveillance was strengthened. Not only the answers for the claims and for the questions. Please check the last edition of the draft law, and we have the fraction and the ministers' negotiations and meetings, and I have to run. So I would kindly ask you to examine during this week, and you could write to me in Messenger and paying attention to those particular norms or provisions in case you find any mistakes. And we have already found some mistakes and imprecisions, and that is why we need the feedbacks. And for the organizers, if you see how could we create the forum for the discussion at the end of the week, probably kind of a meeting, you have all of the contacts. I'm always for it. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ms. Mariana. Dear colleagues, probably any of you have some questions for discussion, please raise your hands. As we, Ms. Ivan, cannot see the remarks, the questions, or the wishes to express the opinion, that is why I would invite you, Mr. Sergey. Dear colleagues, I would kindly ask you to give me a minute of your attention, and the SSU, by the results of all of the discussions and the position of the SSU, is against the optimistic, and we are against the reforms. No, it is not so. The SSU, I have been one of the officers of the SSU, and frankly, all of the members of the SSU do want to work in the European Special Service, where the tools would be provided, the tools for the implementation of the tasks, and to have the legal protection for the members of the SSU. So we're interested in the reform. We're interested in this reform to take place very carefully and attentively, and for this reform to bring and be useful, to bring positive results rather than problems and challenges. And I agree with you that the key element of this reform should be the effective, efficient control and surveillance over the SSU. As you know, that there is a kind of a ratio. The more powers, the more serious and solid should be the control over their activity to eliminate the abuse. But at the same time, we shouldn't allow, and there is an offer to give the investigation to the State Bureau of Investigation and to give that function to them. But as for today, the State Bureau of Investigation has the pre-trial function and the function to provide operative and to provide the investigation and searches. So instead of fostering, we could make a new dragon. So I would like to say thank you to all of the participants of the discussion. There are quite many remarks and important remarks, and the participants and the representatives of the Parliament and the members of the Parliament, thank you so much for your extremely difficult work, striving to create the draft law which would implement the reform of the SSU, and I would like to say thank you to them, and I would like to call all of you, let's all together, and together with the SSU and with the civil society and with the Ukrainian parliament, let's implement this reform, as this reform is not only for the SSU, not for the Ukrainian parliament. This reform is for the Ukrainian citizens and for the Ukrainian state and for the state of Ukraine. Thank you, Mr. Serhiy. And probably the last question from Ms. Oksana, and she asked to say something. Please address to a person whom you would like to ask. I'm not sure who of the deputies are still here. Probably someone from the committee. Ms. Mariana has left. If I'm not mistaken, there are some deputies. And probably if the deputies are not here, then I don't have a question. The question is, when applying the amendments, I could see the comparative table where the deputies offered such amendments, and now we can see the text in which there are no those amendments, and then a new question arises whether the deputies agreed to withdraw them because these amendments should be considered at the committee. We understand your question. I can see that Anastasia Radina is with us. And Roman Kostenko probably could join us. And Mrs. Anastasia is from the other committee. She's in the committee, in anti-corruption committee. Mrs. Anastasia, could you comment on what
Колеги, з того, що
you
я
know?
зрозуміла,
As far as I
оприлюднений
understand, the
проект
publicated
таблиці
draft
це
law of the
пропозиція
comparative table is the
комітету
offer
відповідно
of the
профільному
committee
нацбезпеки і оборони.
of the national
І тепер
security and
ця
defense,
таблиця буде
and this
обговорюватися
comparative
на
table would
засіданні
be discussed
комітету і
at the
відповідно в
session
тій
of
чи
the
іншій
committee.
редакції буде
In this or that
затверджена.
edition, it would be passed. Thank you, Anastasia. Unfortunately, Oksana, we didn't have the deputies from the direction deputies who could answer the issue. Now we know that, so to say, the kitchen or the pot where they all in, and we would sum up. Ms. Mariana Bezugla has suggested to have one more meeting at the end of the week after all of us would have an opportunity to get familiar, to read the draft law with all the amendments. And as Ms. Mariana has mentioned, the elaborated draft law, if you have this offer, if you accept this offer, please write us a feedback for us to know whether it's useful, how should we move forward, what should be the next step, and definitely the representatives of different sectors and the representatives of the NGOs. Now I would have to say goodbye to you and would give the word to Roman Forsenko. First of all, I would like to say thank you for the organizing this roundtable, to say thank you to the Center of their Freedoms and our speakers, honorable speakers, participants of the roundtable, and I hope that all the elaborations we have in Verkhovna Rada, and we could influence them for the reform of the SSU to meet the European demands, the European standards, for Ukraine to move in the proper vector, for us not to have those chaos systems of control and surveillance of the life and existence of each person. I represent the All Ukrainian Association of Communities, and the representatives of the SSU quite often have the searches, for example, in water distributing agency, and it's not appropriate. And that is why this reform should be done as soon as possible and should be finished as soon as possible. Thank you, Ms. Alexandra. Thank you, the Center of the Civic Freedoms, for the organizing of this table, and hope that together we could promote the reform of the SSU in the proper direction. And probably we could finish now, and we are waiting for your feedbacks. And we can see that some people say that at the end of the week we must have such a discussion, and most probably we would call all of you once again for such a discussion.